everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congresswoman Andrea Salinas. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited for you to be here to take a slice out of what I can only imagine have been a couple of busy days with news about Oregon as well as news of the government shutdown. I do want to start about your state to kick off the conversation. The Trump administration announced over the weekend they will be deploying members of the National Guard to Portland. And I want to read part of the White House's announcement of that news. They wrote this, quote, "The radical left's reign of terror in Portland ends now, with President Donald J. Trump mobilizing federal resources to stop Antifa-led hellfire in its tracks. While Democrat politicians deny reality, it's obvious what's happening in Portland isn't protest. It's premeditated anarchy that has scarred the city for years, leaving officers battered, citizens terrorized, and property defaced." To start off the conversation, what do you make of the news of President Trump federalizing these troops?
First, I think sadly, President Trump has a warped sense of what is reality on the ground. His characterization of what is happening in Portland and in Oregon is it's just not reality at all. I don't think if he had actually spoken to anybody in law enforcement, Portland Police Bureau, Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, or state police, he would not hear that description as you put out in the, as you just stated in the press release. It's been calm and peaceful. Of course, people have been exerting their First Amendment rights and protesting, but nothing to the degree that would warrant federal troops at all. And so it's a warped sense of reality for sure.
That's something that the police chief of Portland, Bob Day, has told media that, there have been protests, but it's nothing that compares to what the president's describing it as. He said this: "Even though we had some disturbances at the facility, after some quick targeted arrests, it quickly dissipated, and that was the end of story." However, President Trump did say Portland looked like a war zone. He compared it to images from World War II. What do you think the National Guard troops being sent into Portland, do you think that's going to make the situation better or worse?
Oh, it will clearly make the situation worse. President Trump's response to federalize our own National Guard is harmful. It will cause additional chaos. It is, I think his intention is to militarize a state that is calm and peaceful right now. And for us, that looks like normalizing the military in not just our state, but around the country. And that seems to be what he is doing. It's either that or he is highly, highly confused, and there is some cognitive decline that is happening right now with the president, where he is confusing what happened in 2020 in Oregon with what is the reality on the ground right now. I think there also is probably some attempt to limit the rights and freedoms of his perceived enemies so he can accumulate more power. But limiting First Amendment rights and trampling on free speech is not the way to run a democratic nation, a republic, right? And that is what we have. And we have to abide by the Constitution. He is trampling on the Constitution right now, so I'm very proud of our Attorney General for trying to put a stop to this.
And the state of Oregon sued the Trump administration. Where do you see that lawsuit going? Do you think we're going to see troops in Portland soon?
I don't. So the case that the Attorney General brought forward is supposed to be heard on Friday, and it should restrict Trump from moving in. And essentially it is saying under Article 10 that you cannot, without some type of proof to show that there is either another nation who is coming in to attack us, or that there is some type of insurrection occurring. And I think President Trump knows what an insurrection looks like. He actually caused one on January 6, 2021 in our nation's capital. So he should be very aware of what that looks like. Unless you can provide some evidence of that, you cannot bring in the National Guard. That is under current statute. And so the Attorney General is making that claim, and I think the courts will side with the state of Oregon. However, I did actually bring some additional legislation forward on Friday. I just introduced it that basically says the National Guard cannot step in. It puts a finer point on our current statute that prohibits the National Guard from interfering with and using National Guard for enforcement of our immigration laws. Because we saw this happening in 2020 when President Trump was in power the first time, and we started seeing this when he decided to start bringing in military forces in Los Angeles. And so I asked my staff, and we started trying to figure out what could legislation look like to really clarify what this law says. And so this statute would obviously, or this law would put a finer point on this, but for right now, we do have the courts, and I think we will prevail.
The legislation you're referring to is the National Guard Proper Use Act. Do you have any Republican support on that? What has been conversations like across the aisle when it comes to that legislation?
Well, sadly, I just introduced it on Friday at the very last minute before my colleagues decided to go home, and we have not seen them since. And that was the shutdown. They decided to go on vacation while we have all been here on duty trying to work for the American people, we meaning Democrats.
And so before we move on to the government shutdown, I do want to just wrap up the National Guard conversation. Do you think that with Oregon suing the Trump administration, other states have taken action against President Trump deploying the National Guard to those cities? Do you think that President Trump will continue sending National Guard to other cities? I mean, what does the precedent here look like?
I would not be surprised if he tried to continue to do exactly what he's doing. We've been hearing about Memphis. He's trying to move into Illinois. We've seen him move into California. So of course not. He is going to push the boundaries of the law, the Constitution, states' rights and states' laws. So no, I would not be surprised at all. But it is going to take Americans, it's going to take governors, it's going to take attorneys general, but it is also going to take Congress to execute on their co-equal branch of government and our duties as members of Congress to stand up to him as well. So I will certainly be looking for members across the aisle to join me in co-sponsoring that bill.
I've seen arguments from Republicans saying, I don't know why, essentially, Democrats are dying on the hill of President Trump is trying to stop crime, and they are not happy with that, with him sending in the National Guard. I mean, what do you make of that argument?
I would say if you provide me with evidence of that crime, I have said, let's put money down at the border for more border patrol crossings. I don't want fentanyl. I have fentanyl in my district. I want to prevent additional drugs from coming into my communities. It's ravaging my communities. I absolutely would be there for additional resources to stop the drugs from coming across our borders. I'm there, but we're not seeing the type of lawlessness that President Trump is talking about right now that would necessitate militarization of Oregon. And that is what he's trying to do. Yet he has not proven that it is necessary. And as you mentioned, even Portland police has said, we've got this under control. State police have said the same thing, as have Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Oregonians have this under control. We do not need President Trump. We do not need the National Guard, but we will take the $3.8 million that they are intending to spend to do this, and we could use housing, we could use better health care, we could lower the costs for everyday Oregonians.
I do now want to switch gears to the government shutdown. As you said, you're in D.C. right now. The government shut down after the clock struck midnight. I'm curious, walk me through a day in Congress, the first day of the government shutdown. What has your day looked like, and what have your conversations with your colleagues looked like?
So a lot of it has been about trying to figure out who will be impacted. And naturally, federal workers will be impacted, those on the ground, people who work at our airports, people who work at, different healthcare facilities, people who work at the Social Security Administration. Not everybody will be impacted, but things could slow down in different areas, VA facilities, that sort of thing. But ultimately, if this goes on much longer, there will be, things will slow even further, and there could definitely be areas where work will stop. But we also have to recognize, what are we standing up for and what are we trying to accomplish? We are really, as Democrats, we've been talking a lot about making sure that we restore healthcare to, the 16,000 Oregonians in my district who are going to be impacted by the draconian healthcare cuts that Republicans have implemented. So we want to make sure that we stop these cuts, lower costs, and save healthcare across America, but certainly in Oregon. So it's been a lot of making sure that we have the right strategies, the right messages, and making sure we get the message out to people back in our district.
What is the message from Democrats right now? Because I know that if you're missing a paycheck, federal workers won't be paid during this shutdown. 33% of Americans, according to a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College, say they blame both parties equally. They don't call this the Schumer shutdown. They're not calling this the Trump shutdown. They're blaming both parties. So what do you say to those people?
I say I can't worry about where the blame goes. What I need to worry about is making sure that people have what they need. And what people need right now is lower costs and affordable health care. And that is my goal. That is my goal with all of this. We are going to see healthcare costs increase by about $1,500 if Republicans refuse to come to the table. Sorry, $1,500 per month in additional premium costs. That is going to make premiums and healthcare unaffordable for somebody who is over the age of 60. That is unaffordable. We're talking about people who maybe have diabetes, people who have cancer, people who have children with, severe autism. These are people who otherwise would not be able to afford healthcare someplace else. What else are they supposed to do? These are people who maybe are also federal workers. So they're getting hit doubly hard. What I want to do is help to find solutions. And we have a solution. We can reverse what the Republicans have done in their dirty, big, ugly bill. We have a way to do this. We can stop their cuts, lower costs, and save healthcare.
Republicans have said healthcare is a huge issue, but that can't be negotiated overnight. Some Republicans have also said this is a clean CR. The GOP didn't jam any policies in there. Now Democrats are trying to jam their own policies in here and essentially holding the government hostage. That's what they're saying. Senator Josh Hawley, he's someone who wants to work on Medicaid changes, and this is what he said. I don't understand what shutting down government has to do with that. He said this, my message to them, Democrats, is like, hey, I will work with you on all of those things. I think there's a lot of common ground, but let's leave the government funding out of it. Is there a world in which these two things could be separated and the government can reopen, the government shutdown ends, and you can negotiate with Republicans in good faith, or is that just so far gone right now?
This is what I would say to Senator Hawley. Hey, I wish we could trust you. There is no trust left with Republicans or with President Trump. You've harmed the American people to the tune of $4 trillion with their big, ugly bill that's going to leave about 17 million people without Medicaid, without the Affordable Care Act, in order to give $4 trillion to their billionaire buddies. So there is no trust left. We have to make sure that this is all going to happen in one big package. And the idea that they couldn't do it in this package is just false. About 75% of their, what they're calling their clean resolution, is healthcare. So the American people are too smart for this. They know that this is just Republican shenanigans to try to avoid the healthcare conversation. Americans need affordable health care, and they need it now. Democrats are holding strong, And I, for one, am not giving up for Oregonians. They need their health care.
The fact that you're saying there's no trust there with Republicans, with President Trump, Senator Hawley, all of them. I mean, what do negotiations look like right now, if they're even happening? I mean, are they even happening?
That's a good question. I understand from my leadership that they were supposed to go into negotiations, I think, again tomorrow. I think tomorrow is the Jewish holiday. But I think after that, I do think folks were supposed to go home by Friday. So I don't know if anything is going to happen over the weekend. And so we could see things quiet down a bit. And then I'm not sure what's going to happen after that.
Do you think that, and we've seen the longest government shutdown historically in President Trump's first term, that was 35 days. Do you think we're in this for the long haul? Normally, government shutdowns wrap up in a few days. Do you think this will be one of those, or do you think we're just going to be here for a while?
I don't think this is going to be a long fight. I think the Republicans understand that Americans are afraid. Their healthcare costs were already too high. And with HR1, the big ugly bill that they passed and that President Trump kept insisting that they pass, they recognize that it's harmful. It's harmful to millions of Americans. And they recognize that Democrats are standing up for even their constituents in, folks like in rural districts like mine, folks, about 4 different rural hospitals in Oregon are at risk of closure. So people in red areas, in blue areas, in unaffiliated, independent areas, people across the state in Oregon, people across the nation, no matter where you live, your healthcare costs are going up and the Republicans aren't doing anything about it. I think they recognize there's a lot of pressure there. I think they are going to come to the table here very soon and we are going to get a deal.
I'm curious, and correct me if I'm wrong, it does seem like there's almost a personal element to both parties here when it comes to this fight. We saw then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy support a continuing resolution. He's no longer the House Speaker, obviously. We saw just back in March, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer end up doing a 180, supporting a continuing resolution, and he got criticized widely for that. Do you think now both sides are even more entrenched in their decisions of seemingly, as of now, not budging because neither side wants to look politically weak?
I hope that's not the case. I think we need to take politics out of this and listen to the American people and listen to their needs. And they have been clamoring since the last election cycle that what they need are lower costs on housing, healthcare, gas, and groceries. And we're not giving it to them. And right now, healthcare is too expensive. So we need to reverse what the Republicans did earlier this year. We need to make sure that people who will, potentially in 2026 lose out on their Medicaid, we need to make sure that we reverse that. We need to make sure that those who could lose their premium tax credits through the Affordable Care Act and see their premiums increase, we need to reverse that. And that's coming up much more quickly. People will see notices within the next week or so. We need to reverse that. And I think we'll be on the right track. But people from both sides of the aisle need to listen to their constituents.
And I'm curious what the messaging within the Democratic caucus is, because we saw a few senators, 3 senators in the Democratic caucus, vote with Republicans on this CR last night. Is there any sense that you believe more senators will eventually flip and support the continuing resolution eventually, or something? Do you think that all Democrats are standing strong? What does that really look like?
That's a good question, and it's hard for me to speak on, first of all, behalf of senators and on behalf of Senate Democrats. I'm not part of their caucus. I don't know what they're thinking, and I don't know their districts or their states, I should say. But yeah, so it's very different. But, those three may actually be voting for political reasons. And whether or not they have races coming up could be a different story for them. But again, I would say, I think putting front and center the American people or people from their state would be the smartest thing to do right now. And what people need are lower costs, and certainly lower costs and a certainty that their health care is going to be there when they need it. And whether that's an emergency or whether that's for their diabetes, their insulin, their child's, even their child's annual visit. So when they go to play sports, they know that they have it. Whatever the case might be, that healthcare needs to be there.
And I guess my next question is what's next? Because there's a lot of uncertainty when there's a government shutdown. What can people look out for next?
Yeah, I'm hoping that, the first few days, it always feels a little soft and people won't feel the damage. And I'm hoping that's the first few days, again, could just cause short-term damage. But long term, it could be harmful. As I mentioned earlier, we could start to see the real impacts, flight delays at airports. We could start to see delays of checks being mailed from Social Security. But I'm ready to fund the government in a way that protects the people I serve and doesn't harm them. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that everyday people have what they need in order to thrive. And that does mean delivering on healthcare.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. Congresswoman Salinas, thank you so much for joining me. You are welcome back anytime. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation as well. You take care.